Hey there, Benjamin from Lean Strong Fitness and Wellness. Today I've got a wonderful question from Betty, which is it possible to change your metabolism or are you stuck with what you are given? Awesome question, Betty. So the short answer to this is no, you are absolutely not stuck with what you are given. We are not like toasters. We are not fixed. It's not like human beings can accomplish so many amazing things that I just want to point out. I don't want you or anyone else watching this video to feel stuck that, this is the hand I was dealt and that's all I can do. Granted, different people will have different amounts of challenges to get to the same place. Like some things are a little bit naturally easier for some people than others, but you are absolutely not stuck. So first we're going to do a quick primer on what are the components of energy expenditure, because that's, I think, what you're kind of getting at with the metabolism question. So there's four main things that contribute to a human being's metabolism. The first is your basal metabolic rate or resting metabolic rate, so BMR or RMR. And depending on which studies you look at, this can contribute anywhere from like 50-ish to like 60 to 70-ish% of the total calories burned in a day. And this is essentially like if you laid down and did not move for an entire day, like your organs and your brain and your body still, like your heart is still pumping blood, you're still breathing, energy is still being consumed, but it's like the minimum your body needs to stay alive, basically. Next up, we've got the thermic effect of food. So this is a really fancy way of saying when you eat food, it takes calories to process that food, and that contributes to overall calorie expenditure and metabolism. So the best example I have for this is if you were running low on gas in your car, you still need to drive to the gas station in order to get more gas, and it burned a little bit of gas to get to that gas station, depending how far away you live. Your body's the same way. When you eat food, you generally have to chew it, you have to digest it, you have to metabolize it and process it and break it down into the into the forms that we can use in our body, and that takes a little bit of calories. Granted, it's not a ton, it can vary. Overall, this is typically like a few percent up to 10% maximum of the total calorie expenditure in a day. But a really key piece of this is protein takes the most calories to burn and digest itself. So generally speaking, it's about 27 to 30%, meaning if you ate 100 calories of protein like steak, chicken, tofu, etc., you're going to be burning about 30 of those 100 calories just to process the food itself. Which is actually really good because eating more protein essentially can boost your metabolism because now you're taking a few more calories to burn that food or digest that food, sorry. Next up, we have exercise activity thermogenesis, or EAT for short, which is, again, I don't know why scientists do this, a very fancy way of saying exercise. Exercise burns a disappointingly low number of calories actually during the workout. So if you use a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or heart rate monitor of any sort to track this, generally speaking, those are all inaccurate by about 30 to 50%, which is wildly inaccurate. Now, it tends to be constant error. So if yours is always overestimating by 50%, at least it's always overestimating by about 50%. But when you see that someone had a 700 calorie workout at a boot camp or whatever, probably not. There are people who can burn that many calories in a workout, but you have to be in incredibly good shape to burn that many calories through exercise. Generally speaking, exercise accounts for like 5 to 10% of your energy expenditure in a day. It's just really, really hard to outwork that. And the best example is if you hop on one of our assault bikes or Airdyne bikes at the gym and you bust your ass and see how hard you can push, look at that little calorie indicator. Knowing that it's still probably wildly inaccurate, it's a good example of like how hard it actually is to burn calories through exercise. But the reason, and this ties into your question perfectly, that exercise is so important for metabolism and health is because it's not about the calories that you burn during the workout. It's about the calories that you burn afterwards. So you've probably heard people talk about the afterburn effect, so to speak, like that's Orange Theory's whole deal. Basically, if you do a challenging workout, especially if it's strength-based, because strength-based is more bang for your buck, as you know, you're going to have a window of anywhere from 24 to 48 hours where your metabolism is a little bit elevated. So you're just going to burn more calories naturally at rest, like your RMR or BMR is going to increase, which is awesome. And that's from like rebuilding your muscles and recovering. It's like if you have a really hard workout and then an hour later try to do it again, you're just kind of gassed and can't do it. You need that recovery period because you actually rebuild your muscle and burn more of those calories during recovery than you typically do during the workout. And then the second really important piece for exercise is if you get stronger over the course of time from workouts, you can now do more, and now you have the opportunity to burn more. So a good example of this is someone who hasn't exercised for a while and maybe doesn't have a really high level of fitness. They just like don't have a really big engine. They get tired after 15, 20, 30 minutes, and they just can't do as much work as someone who is like in a lot better shape. So if over time, it's not about the calories you burn in that workout, it's about how you increased your level of fitness, and now you can just handle more and do more. And you basically have a bigger engine, so to speak. Your metabolism has changed because you're able to do more stuff. And then the fourth and final piece when it comes to your metabolism is called non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which again is an extremely fancy way of saying basically non-exercise activity. So that would be things like me moving my hands on this video, the fact that I'm standing at my standing desk rather than sitting. It would be tapping your toes if you're fidgety like I am. It would be going for a walk. It would be gardening. It would be cooking. It's like literally everything you do that isn't a workout or lying in bed. And the really cool point with NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is it is neat because that can vary wildly depending on your activity level. So from what I've seen, again, research varies on this because humans are all tend to be a little bit different in how much they move, but this can vary up to 1,000 calories per day per person. So even if you've got like a relatively slow basal metabolic rate, or you're a smaller human being with smaller organs and it takes less energy to keep them moving, versus someone who's like a 300-pound person is going to burn more calories at rest than a 100-pound person just because they have a larger body that has to be fueled. But when it comes to activity, you can really move the needle on that. And that's why we're such big proponents of things like going for walks, standing desks, doing as much as you can that isn't just honestly sitting. Because for the most part, we spend 8-ish hours, a third of our life in bed. We then sit while we eat breakfast. We then sit in the car on the way to work. We then sit at an office. We then sit on the way back home. And then we then sit at the dinner table and then sit after dinner. And I don't think necessarily that sitting is the new smoking. I think that just people say it because it's got alliteration. But if you can continue to be more active throughout your life with small things like going for walks after meals, or walking to the corner store instead of driving, or just going for hikes on the weekend and making sure you're always getting activity, like the 10,000 step per day mark, that is one of the most valuable ways that you can actually change your metabolism. Plus, when you wrap all of that stuff together, the exercise piece comes even more strongly too, because the more muscle that you have, the higher your basal metabolic rate is going to be. Just like I said, a larger human being is going to need more fuel, more calories, the same way a larger engine is going to need more fuel than a smaller fuel efficient car. As you build your muscles, you build your engine, and it's easier to sustain. And this is critically important for people who are smaller framed or smaller stature, because it can be really challenging to not overeat. Because if you're just a smaller human being who needs less calories, your secret weapon in this is not doing more cardio and running on the treadmill. It's just being more active in life. You're going to get way more steps over the course of like gardening, snow shoveling, hiking, going for walks, that type of stuff, playing with your kids or grandkids, playing with your dog. That's going to do way more steps and calories burned than you're ever going to be able to do in exercise, because you're doing it over the course of like a 16-hour day. So coming back to your original question, are you stuck with your metabolism? I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into, no, you're absolutely not. Yeah, it's going to take some intentional effort to actually be able to change things, but it is something that everybody can do. Now, there is a genetic component to this, and I know, basically speaking, your genetics account for like roughly 10-ish% of your metabolism. So if you see someone who's in really good shape, it's really easy, and I've done this too, to be like, oh, that person must just have like really good genetics. Like it must be easier for them than it is for me. Oftentimes hard work is like actually what made the change, which is consistency in the gym. If you're hitting roughly 150 workouts a year, which is about 3 days a week with a couple of weeks off, you do that over time, you then become the person who's like, wow, you must have really good genetics for this. I'm the perfect example. I was always wasn't like super overweight, but a little bit chubbier. I was into video games and arts, basically things that didn't involve any activity. I was never really that good at sports. Like, I think the reason I'm actually good at fitness is because it's actually always been very challenging for me. So if I've like built muscle and look good in shape, like I've got all sorts of injuries and other things I've overcome, that it would be really easy to mentally throw in the towel, so to speak, and be like, well, I just was dealt a bad hand. But the reality is, like, through consistent exercise and activity, you can change your metabolism. You can change the way your body operates. You can adjust your nutrition, adjust your exercise level. You can increase your basal metabolic rate. You can increase the thermic effect of food by getting more protein, which has a million other good benefits as well. And if you're active and exercise on a regular basis, I would love to do a study where you have like 2 clones that are the same age, exact same metabolism and lifestyle and everything, but one of them you just get to be more active and exercise more, and one of them you don't, because NEAT can vary so much. Like, that active person might actually have like twice as fast as a metabolism because of how active they've built their lifestyle to be. And going back to everything we've said about habits, if you can make being active a habit, it doesn't feel like work anymore. And then all of a sudden you have like automatically increased your metabolism, and you now have just like a bigger engine to work with, meaning you have more options. Half the reason I exercise consistently is because I really like junk food. It's delicious, especially cereal, Fruit Loops, apple cinnamon Cheerios, love it. So if I can have more muscle and be more active, a few extra 100 calories of junk food just don't really move the needle, because it's a smaller percentage of my overall intake. Versus if my maintenance calories was like 1,500 calories because I was a lot less active, those few hundred calories in Fruit Loops are going to be a greater percentage of my overall intake and lead to other issues like body fat storage or low energy or insulin sensitivity or that type of thing. So thank you so much for the question, Betty. You absolutely can change metabolism, and your two go-to things are, generally speaking, more activity, more exercise, and to a certain degree, a little bit more protein to increase the thermic effect of food. All of that over time will not only increase your basal metabolic rate, but it will also increase your total metabolism expenditure over the course of a day. Thanks for the great question, and hope that made sense.